Berger back with Defense Wins Fantasy, part of the Fantasy Holics Podcast Network. Feeling a little better this week. Voice is starting to come back. So we're going to dive into even more defensive-minded strategy for fantasy football this week. The first thing we're going to drop off on is some top performers from last week. There's just been some stellar play coming from the defensive side of the ball. We're going to start with the defensive ends. We're even going to break it up, DNs, D tackles, corners, and safeties, just to make sure we're covering as much as we can. First on the list is DeMarcus Lawrence with a 3-sack performance coming Monday night. Hello, sir. Good to see you again. You know, your normal table's over this way. Getting back in it. Now, he did get a little banged up, so it's something to keep an eye on. He was limited this week with a foot injury, but I am happy to see him back on top of the leaderboards. He's a monster when he gets after the quarterback, and he's going to keep doing it all year long. He's got a good division to be in. He gets to play the Giants again. He gets Washington Redskins this week. Look forward to seeing his name a few more times this year. A little bit of a surprise with the second overall defensive end performance with another 3-sack performance was Deatrich Wise for the New England Patriots. Probably on your waiver wire. We'll talk about him a little bit later. Brandon Graham had a great week, 2.5 sacks there. He's been one of those guys that I've always really liked. He's never really came to fruition as a really solid IDP player, but he's had a heck of a career as a player. But once in a while, you'll get these blow-up games from him, and it's nice to see it, but it's hard to keep him going. He's just kind of a hit-or-miss, boom-or-bust kind of player. For instance, this year alone, he had a half-sack week 1, but really no tackles. Week 2, couple tackles, and that's it. Week 3, monster performance, 2.5 sacks, 6 tackles, and a forced fumble. You know, it's tough to get somebody like that as consistent. But if you're looking for guys that can give you an opportunity, start looking at some of those matchups. You might be able to figure out when Brandon Graham's time might come. That defense has been monstrous getting after the quarterback so far this year. Trey Hendrickson jumping onto the list with a 2.5 sack performance as well. He's had a pretty slow start to the year as well, with really only having a few tackles as a first sack performance. He also had 2 forced fumbles in this game. So once again, maybe he's getting going. I know Cincinnati as a whole has struggled to kind of get going this year, but hopefully that's going to be behind him. Hopefully maybe it starts next week as my Miami Dolphins play him tonight, really. So let's see how that plays out. One guy that I talked about in the preseason that's really starting to put it together is Max Crosby. Great to see him finally doing some work this year as far as the fantasy side goes. We know he's a stud in the real life, but he's never really put up the fantasy numbers you'd expect for a guy that just made the amount of money he did this offseason. But week 1, 10 tackles. Week 2, 4 tackles and a sack. Week 3, 9 tackles and a sack and a forced fumble. That is some really solid floor-level tackling right there, my friend. Keep it up, Max. You get those sacks in there, get 10, maybe even up to 15 this year. Going to be a stellar performance all around. And I've talked about him for a couple weeks. Alec Highsmith starting to really take over that role from having T.J. Watt out. He had another 1.5-sack performance. Now, he had 3 sacks week 1 with TJ there. He slowed down a little bit in week 2, but then he came back with a 1.5-sack performance in week 3 against Cleveland. Keep an eye on him. He is a guy that is worth it. Like I said, I'm talking about him in the DNs area because in a lot of leagues he has that linebacker DN eligibility. That makes him even more valuable. I wouldn't necessarily feel as comfortable starting him as a linebacker, but if you could put him at a DN spot, he's going to be up there with the best of them. A couple other guys that I'm going to kind of jump around and talk about. Melvin Ingram, he had a 2-sack performance this week. Another fumble recovery. He's got a heck of a start for playing a guy that doesn't play a lot of down and distances. He's, just a situational pass rusher there in Miami, but he's been a lot of right place, right time. He got that touchdown week 1 after the sack fumble from Brian Jones, and then he got the sack fumble recovery from Javon Holland this week, along with 2 sacks for his own. We'll see if he keeps getting a little bit more into the rotation, but he's a tough one to kind of figure out. One of the up-and-comers that I had talked about in the preseason, Gregory Rousseau, showing what's going on there in Buffalo. Sack in every game this year. A sack and a half last week. Just putting up numbers. Just impressive. I love this guy coming out of college. He dropped because he didn't play in 2020. And Buffalo has a rising star on their D-line. Moving on, we'll go on and talk about a few D tackles as well. Kenny Clark for Green Bay had a pretty good game. Once again, he's DND tackle eligible because of where he flexes around. But 2 sacks this week with another 3 tackles for loss. Just a solid game after kind of being disappointing so far this year. It's somebody to keep an eye on. They were playing, a pretty solid Tampa Bay team, but that Tampa Bay team seems to be a little bit struggling on the O-line, and you can tell that Tom Brady's getting frustrated with that. Sheldon Rankins had a nice blow-up game with a sack and 9 tackles. He's been, 6 tackles, sack and 6 tackles. He's been kind of a hit-or-miss guy. He's picked it up the last couple weeks, getting a little bit more level on the tackling, but it's somebody, once again, just kind of monitor. We'll see. Aaron Donald's up there. Hi, buddy. How you doing? Nice to see you. As I said, your table's this way. You had another sack, 4 tackles this game. He is just a monster when it comes to disrupting the passer. He got 2 sacks already this season. Glad that he came back this year. It's one of those guys that talked about retiring the offseason. You only get to see these greats play for so long, and I'm blessed to say we get to watch him play again this year. Grady Jarrett had another sack this week with 4 tackles. And then, he's had a sack and a half week 1, didn't do anything week 2, and then week 3 he's kind of back on track. Just a stud D tackle in Atlanta. And we had Fletcher Cox, who had a sack and a half for that Philly defense. That Philly defense is just monstrous. There are 4 players in the top 20 on the Philly D line that did work. You know whose name's missing? Jordan Davis. Why? Because everybody has to block Jordan Davis, and they do that, and everybody else gets to the quarterback. Maybe we'll see it a little bit farther down the road, down this season, that they start trying to block some of these other guys if they continually get to the quarterback. But as of right now, Jordan Davis is not a fantasy-relevant defensive tackle. Once again, as I said in the offseason, Jordan Davis is going to be great for the Philadelphia Eagles, but Jordan Davis will not be great for fantasy owners. That's just how it is. It's just what role he's playing on that team. So let's move on to some linebackers. Roquan Smith, how are you doing? 16 total tackles, 10 assists, 6 solo, an interception to boot. He came flying in this week. Nick Bolton, he's a guy that I'm not going to lie, I was a little bit unsure because his efficiency was so high last year. Would he be able to put it together? Yeah, no problem. 9 total tackles this week, 6 solo, 3 assisted, 2 sacks. Nick Bolton is the man in Kansas City. Jerome Baker finally showed himself up in Miami. He had a monstrosity amount of tackles with 13 this week, 9 solo, 4 assisted, and a pass defense. That guy was all over the field. Basically, he was guarding Singletary on the out routes, and Singletary caught 9 balls, and guess what? Jerome Baker got about that many tackles. TJ Edwards for Philly is trying to hold off Nakobe Dean. Looks like he's doing a good job of it. Again, he had 9 solo tackles, a tackle assisted, 2 for loss, and a sack. He has had at least 7 tackles a game so far this year, with multiple of those times being 10 tackle games. Alex Anzalone, hey, as I talked about, is he a great fantasy football player? He is when he gets out there. Is he great in real life? Not really, but he gets the tackles while he's there, so take it while you can get it, but don't expect him to be an all-year kind of guy. He did have 9 solo, 2 assisted tackles, and a sack against Minnesota this week, so kudos to you. And the last one I want to talk about is Mr. Jordan Hicks. I've talked about him on a couple different podcast episodes on my concerns with what this means for Eric Kendricks. 10 solo tackles this week, 4 assisted tackles. Once again, just leading the team. That's his second 14 tackle game this year. Week 2, he had only 3 tackles, which was a little bit weird, but it was against Philly. Maybe a different type of style of scheme. But Jordan Hicks is outperforming Eric Kendricks, and that's the guy you need in this backfield. This defensive backfield, that is. Make the change. Try to make a trade if you can, but this is Jordan Hicks's defense now. We'll move on to some cornerbacks and go through a few of them. Denzel Ward, how you doing? Wonderful day for Cleveland. What was funny was I was listening to the commentators on this game. They talked about how Denzel Ward been getting beat this year, this, that, and the other, and then he does everything, gets a fumble recovery for a touchdown, 5 tackles, 2 passes, defense. Works out pretty good, I think. But in all seriousness, he has not had a good year. He's had just a few tackles, so this is kind of a blow-up game. Don't be surprised if he drops back off. Richie Grant, however, for the Atlanta Falcons, cornerback/safety eligibility, has had 10 tackles, 6 tackles, 7 tackles, as well as an interception the first 3 games this year. But he had a monster week 3. Another couple guys that have been really doing a good job. This week, Trevin Diggs. Hey, man, you did something. You're getting there. That defense is still strong. He had a pick, only 1 tackle, but he had a pick. And in the other 2 games this year, he's actually got his tackle numbers up a little bit. So he might be a person that is available to actually be relevant this year. He's not going to be what he was last year, as we all know. But he's not going to completely bust on you, it looks like. He might give you a little bit of opportunity. Then J.C. Horn had an interception this week. Nice to see him continue to move up the ranks. He's had, 5 tackles, 3 tackles, a couple tackles, but 3 pass defenses this week and a pick. Granted, it was Jameis Winston, and who does Jameis Winston not throw an interception to? But you take them when you can get them, Finally, to the safeties, which I just had a ball watching this week. And technically, Richie Grant is in that safety conversation, but a lot of leagues he kind of is flexed out there because he goes down to the box. But there's 3 guys that I really want to talk about. I'm going to start from the bottom up. Mike Edwards, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 13 tackles, young man. 9 solo, 4 assisted, doing some work. Coming off last week where he had 3 tackles, but he had an interception to the house. Then he had 5 tackles a week before. This guy is getting it this year, and you love to see it. They had some safety question marks coming into this season. They were moving a lot of people around, pieces around, but Mike Edwards is taking care of business there in Tampa. Then I want to talk about Mr. Javon Holland. Once again, having a day. 2 out of the 3 weeks this year, he's really performed. This time was way of tackles and sacks. He had a sack and a half, 9 solo tackles, 1 assisted, 2 passes defended, and a forced fumble coming off the edge, sacking Josh Allen and getting that fumble. Guy is just a rising star in the NFL. He's just putting up fantasy numbers that just are the explosion games that you're looking for. Hopefully he gets a little bit more consistent with the tackles, but once again, it is what it is. If he's going to get you those interceptions and those sacks, take them all day. And then the coming out party for Jalen Petrie, Houston Texans. Listen, he had 10 tackles in week 1. We saw this coming. 5 in week 2. And then he had 8 tackles, 5 solo, 3 assisted this week, a sack, a fumble recovery, and 2 interceptions. Hello, sir. Playing 100% of the snaps every game this year. He's a guy that's a rookie, but he's playing like he's been there for a while. Pick him up. Feel good about starting him. He is the real deal. Love to see it. Love to see it. Gotta love these young guys getting their game going and taking care of business. Now, moving on. We're going to have a DefCon follow-up from last week. The three guys that we're talking about are Carl Lawson, Fred Warner, and Isaiah Simmons. What happened this weekend? Where are we at with these guys? I'm nervous. What do I do? Let's start with Carl Lawson. I'm holding pat on DEFCON 4 with this guy. I'll tell you that right away. He had a bad week. Like a tackle. I think that's it. But I told you someone not to start this week. Told you just hang on. Keep him on your bench. Don't worry about playing him because I knew it wasn't going to be a good performance. But what I did like is that his snap percentage jumped another 8%. He's now up to 66% this week in snap percentage. Tells me that they're being cautious with him. They're bringing him back. And by mid-October, I feel like this guy is going to be back to a full-time player. So hold pat at DEFCON 4. Just because he's a full-time player, he's still got to prove it on the field. And that's why he's a 4. I think he's going to be all right with it. But at this point in time, still a DEFCON 4. Fred Warner almost doubled his season tackles in this one game. Dude's going to be just fine. That's all I need to say about that. Status removed from DEFCON watch. Congratulations, Fred. Enjoy the rest of your season. I am off your tail. Isaiah Simmons. 1 assisted tackle. In the entire game. You could fall down and get an assisted tackle at some point. Like, come on, Isaiah. So this is now to the point where you need to get out while you still can. There is no honor with going down with this ship. He's moving to DEFCON 1. He will destroy your fantasy team, so remove him and get away from the blast area. Allow somebody else to pick him up on your team or in your league. Play him, hopefully against you, and give you a victory. Because the name value and the hype around this guy, to me, is dead. I'm over it. He is long gone. It's starting to make me feel like they drafted Zaven Collins after 1 year of Isaiah Simmons because they saw what he was. I don't know if that's true or not, but sure kind of feels that way. They're not giving him the snap percentages. He's not performing on the field. Say bye. If you can trade him to somebody, do it. Do it now. And be at peace with yourself. All right. So that takes us to some of the pickups of the week that we need to talk about. So 2 guys that I want to go over. One of them is Jerry Hughes. This guy is 34 years old. Not saying that he's a dynasty asset that you're going to be super happy with having long term. But I am going to say this guy's got 4 sacks in 3 games. Don't cut somebody that's like up and comer and you feel good about for them. But if you need a player, if you're a Joey Bosa owner that just lost him, maybe pick this guy up for a few weeks. He did have a good game, really bad game, really, really good game. But he's also was doing great in Buffalo before he came to Houston. So it's worth picking him up. Other guy, Rashawn Green. He didn't play in the first game of the season, so he's a little bit under the radar. But since then, he has 8 solo tackles, 4 assists, and 2 sacks over the last 2 weeks. This Houston defense is performing, guys. Like, we want to make fun of Lovie Smith all we want, Santa Claus out there calling plays, but he is very capable of getting a defense to play successfully. So Raheem Green and Jerry Hughes, both of those I kind of put in the same category. If you're looking for a Joey Bosa replacement, maybe if Myles Garrett doesn't play this week because he flipped his car 14 times because he was trying to miss a bunny or whatever it was, get yourself somebody. Then obviously Deatrich Wise, who just had a monster game. He's a really good guy that's been playing in the league for a while, and hopefully he's actually getting into this fantasy relevant player at this point in time. I don't know. I feel like he's worth a roster spot, but he might not be available in a lot of places. But having a 3-sack game, 6 tackles, totally worth taking a look at it. And I talked a little bit about Brandon Graham. Him, Hassan Reddick, Josh Sweat have all been killing it for Philadelphia. Thank you very much, Jordan Davis. Any of those guys are worth a pickup and spot play when needed. They're not going to be as consistent because there's so many of them getting to the quarterback, but 100% if you're needing a play, matchup driven, these guys are guys that I would go after. Now, looking at some linebackers. Quan Alexander is a name I didn't think that I'd talk about fantasy relevancy anymore in his career. But Quincy Williams got hurt for the Jets, so Quam is going to see time. I mean, Quincy could be out the rest of the season. We don't know yet. It was a pretty nasty lower leg injury. But Alexander's next man up. Last year, they did not have depth at linebacker, and it really, really killed them. They brought in Quan. He's a good depth piece. He's been a consistent tackler in the past. And so putting him next to C.J. Mosley, I would make sure that if you need a linebacker, Alexander's going to be the guy that's going to get probably on your waiver wire, is going to have the most time or the most snap percentages going forward. Another guy that has been really doing a great job, and I talked about him last week because he's been playing 100% of the snaps, is Zaire Franklin for Indianapolis. If Shaq Leonard is still out, Zaire Franklin is a solid player to have. Even when Leonard comes back, you might hang on to Franklin because it's a back injury. We don't know what that's going to do for Shaq Leonard. He could re-aggravate it in this first action. You don't know, and that could just put Zaire Franklin right back into the driver's seat there. The other guy, moving on to some safeties, Jabril Peppers. I talked about him this offseason as a guy that I just didn't want any part of. Why did I not want any part of him? Because he was splitting time with Kyle Duggar and Adrian Phillips. Well, Duggar's now on the shelf with an injury. And Jabril Peppers' first game without Duggar was 5 solo tackles, 1 assist, and a fumble recovery. As long as he keeps getting the snaps, he's worth at least an ad or somebody to keep a watchful eye on. Looking in Minnesota, safety-wise, Harrison Smith inactive with a concussion. And Lewis Seen, the first rounders, apparently they don't trust him yet for prime time. Cameron Bynum and Josh Metellus are 2 guys that are well worth grabbing. Once again, these are guys in a pinch that you can pull in and play. If you were a Kyle Duggar owner or a Jamal Adams owner still trying to find a guy to replace him, these 2 guys will get their fair share of snaps and have the opportunity to take care of business there in Minnesota. So that's what we got this week. A lot on the docket. Another great week of fantasy football set up. We finally got some London games. Not that I'm the biggest fan of London games, but I do like watching football at 9 in the morning. It's not bad. But outside of everything else, make sure you're still listening to the Fat Boys Dynasty podcast as they're going with mid-season form. They keep talking about their meals, and it's it's just making me a little bit hungry. But I'm excited to get some dessert with a little cherry on top. Hopefully that's Joe Burrow with a very, very dirty grass-fed jersey and helmet with a 4-0 Miami Dolphin team this time tomorrow. But we'll find out. We'll see you guys next week on Defense Wins Fantasy. This podcast has been presented by the Fantasyholics Podcast Network.